Picture a house so large that you can walk for 5 minutes without leaving it, and still not have reached the end of the east wing. Now fill it with 47 servants who will not look you in the eye unless you speak first. Add the smell of beeswax candles burning in rooms you will never enter, the creak of floorboards 3 floors below your bedroom, the particular silence of a house that contains a great deal of money and almost no warmth. That's Grosvenor Square in 1792. One of the finest addresses in London, one of the most gilded traps in Europe, a place where a woman could dress in £40,000 worth of diamonds and still feel, at 2 in the morning, utterly and completely alone. We're going there tonight, not to admire the architecture, not to count the silverware. We're going to live it. One day, one woman, everything she would have seen, smelled, touched, and survived. Her name is, well, for tonight, it's yours. So I make these history stories and I genuinely have no idea if you're falling asleep to the sound of my voice describing the particular horror of Georgian lead-based face powder, or if you're wide awake at 3 in the morning wondering whether a duchess really did have to ask permission to open a window in her own house. The answer to that last question, by the way, is more complicated than you'd think. Get comfortable. Here we go. Your eyes open. For a moment, half a second, the way it always is, you've forgotten where you are. There's a high ceiling above you, lost in shadow. The fire in the grate has burned down to embers. The room is enormous and dark and cold in the way that only very large rooms can be cold. Not the sharp cold of outside, but a settled, permanent chill that the fire never quite defeats. Then it hits you. Not the smell, not first. First it's the weight of what today is, what today requires. Then the smell comes, layer by layer, the way it always does in this room. Beeswax from the dozen candles extinguished around midnight. Underneath that, coal smoke from the fire, the particular sweetness of it. The face cream your maid applied last night. Almond oil and rose water and something your mother used to use that you can never quite identify. Your own hair, still thick with the powder that was brushed into it yesterday afternoon and never fully came out because you dismissed your maid before the full removal, because sometimes you simply need to be alone, even if being alone means waking up with powder residue on your pillow. And underneath all of it, coming faintly through the window glass, London, the particular smell of London in summer, coal and horse dung and the Thames at low tide and something chemical and faintly rotten that simply is the city, that has no single source, that just rises from 500,000 people living on top of each other and breathing the same air. You are 31 years old. You've been the Duchess of Ashworth 9 years. Your husband left 6 weeks 4 days ago. Welcome to Grosvenor Square, London, July 1792. The clock on the mantelpiece shows 7:30. Somewhere below, the house is already awake. You can hear it, or rather you can feel it, the way you feel the movement of a ship without consciously registering the motion. The bass note of the house going about its business. Footsteps on the servants' stairs, the distant clatter of the kitchen, a door closing carefully on the ground floor. 47 people live in this house and work in this house, and somewhere in this house are asleep when they shouldn't be, and awake when they shouldn't be, and doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and almost certainly also doing things they're not supposed to be doing, and you are aware of all of it and responsible for all of it, and none of it requires you to be conscious before 8 o'clock. But you're awake. You've been awake since 5. You always are now, since he left. It's not grief, exactly. It's not as simple as that. It's more like the particular alertness of someone who has realized they're the only adult in the room, who has understood that the house, the accounts, the servants, the letters, the obligations, social and financial and personal, all of it rests temporarily entirely on you. And that temporarily is a word you've stopped trusting. You lie still for another few minutes, letting the room come fully into focus around you. The ceiling is high and ornate, plasterwork cherubs and laurel wreaths that cost more than your father's entire house in Derbyshire. The bed is enormous, carved mahogany posts reaching toward those cherubs, curtains of deep blue silk that match the upholstery on the chairs by the window. Everything in this room is exactly right. Everything matches. Everything has been chosen to convey precisely the correct impression of ducal taste and ducal wealth. You hate the curtains. You've always hated them. They're too heavy. They block out every trace of light in the morning. They hold the cold in winter and the heat in summer, and they smell faintly of must, no matter how often they're beaten. And when you mentioned this to your husband approximately 3 years ago, he looked at you with the expression he reserves for things he finds incomprehensible and said, "They were my mother's," and that was the end of that. The Dowager Duchess of Ashworth chose every piece of fabric in this house. She died 11 years ago, and her taste in curtains lives on with a persistence that the woman herself failed to achieve. You sit up. The cold air hits your face immediately, sharp and unwelcome. The fire is almost out. You could ring for your maid. You could be back in the warmth of the bed in 30 seconds. The curtains closed. The cold kept at bay while Mary brings chocolate and stirs the fire back to life. But there's a letter on the writing table by the window that has been sitting there since yesterday afternoon, and you haven't opened it, and you're going to have to open it, and you've been putting it off because you know the handwriting on the outside and you know what it's likely to say, and you're not sure you're ready to read it yet. It's from your husband's solicitor. You get out of bed. The floor is cold under your bare feet, marble tiles with a thin rug over them that manages to be both expensive and inadequate. You reach for your morning robe, a heavy thing in cream wool that your maid laid over the chair last night, and wrap it around yourself and pad across the cold floor to the writing table. The letter is thick. That's either very good or very bad. You don't open it yet. You stand at the window instead, looking out at Grosvenor Square in the early morning light. It's beautiful, actually. Whatever else London is, and you've catalogued most of its deficiencies at length, it can be genuinely beautiful at 7:30 in the morning in July when the light is coming in low and golden, and the square's garden is still damp with dew, and the street hasn't yet filled with the daily chaos of coaches and horses and vendors and footmen, and the ceaseless, grinding, magnificent machinery of the city. A gardener is moving through the square's central garden below, invisible from the street level but visible from your high window. He's pushing a barrow, slowly, stopping to deadhead something here and there. He's the only person moving. The whole square is his for now. You watch him for a minute. He doesn't know he's being watched. Then you pick up the letter. The thing about being a Georgian Duchess that nobody tells you, or rather nobody tells you because the people who know are not in the habit of saying things that make themselves look bad, is that the job is relentless. Not in the way that, say, a dairymaid's job is relentless. Not in the way that involves rising at 4 in the morning and working till dark, hands cracked and raw, body aching in the specific way that physical labour produces. That kind of relentless is honest, at least. That kind of relentless, your mother would have said, builds character. No. The relentlessness of being a duchess is the relentlessness of performance, of never, at any moment, in any room containing another human being, forgetting what you are and what that means, of understanding that every word you say and every gesture you make and every room you walk into and every invitation you accept and every invitation you decline is observed, recorded, discussed, and judged, and that the verdict of that judgment affects not only you but your husband and your children, if you had any, which you don't, and your house and your name and the 17 other people who carry some version of that name and who will thank you or blame you accordingly. It is exhausting in a way that has no physical location, not your hands, not your back, not your legs. Somewhere behind your eyes, maybe. Somewhere in the part of you that is always, always on. You're dressed by 8:30. This takes 45 minutes. Not because you're vain. Well, not only because you're vain, but because being correctly dressed as the Duchess of Ashworth in 1792 is a technical undertaking of some complexity. Mary helps you into your stays first. These are stiffened with whalebone, 12 panels of it, and they go on over your shift and are laced at the back. Mary laces them firmly but not savagely. She knows, from experience, exactly how tight is appropriate for a morning at home, tight enough to give the correct silhouette, not so tight that breathing becomes a deliberate act. The silhouette in 1792 is interesting. You're not yet in the extreme fashions that will come with the new century. Those astonishing high-waisted things that make women look like columns. No, in 1792 the ideal shape is still the cone from waist, the ruffled chest, the powdered hair piled high. The stays create a very specific geometry. Your waist goes in, your chest goes up, your back goes straight. Your back is always straight now. It was trained into you so early that you don't remember a time when it wasn't. When you were 6, your governess used to make you walk with a book on your head for an hour each afternoon. You don't use a book anymore. You don't need to. Over the stays goes a petticoat, then the gown itself. Morning dress, so not the full formal thing, but still not simple. Pale blue silk with white embroidery at the sleeves and hem, buttons at the back which Mary does up with practised speed. Then a fichu, a piece of white muslin tucked into the neckline because you are at home, and while no one but servants will see you until later, later will come, and being correctly dressed for later means starting now. Then your hair. Fashion in 1792 is in a state of transition. The enormous powdered structures of 20 years ago, those edifices that required wire frameworks and pomade and horsehair pads and sometimes small decorative ships, are largely gone. Sensible people have moved on, but powder is still used for formal occasions, and your hair, which is naturally a very dark brown that reads almost black in certain lights, has been powdered so many times over the past decade that it takes the grey tone somewhat reluctantly, somewhat patchily, and always has a faint smell of the flour and starch mixture that constitutes the powder, even after it's been brushed out. Mary works through your hair with a brush, removing last night's powder, section by section. The brush strokes firm and practised, the pale grey dust drifting down to settle on the cloth she spread around your shoulders. The sound is rhythmic, almost soothing, like being groomed, which, you suppose, is exactly what it is. Your hair, once clean of powder, goes up. Mary's fingers are fast and confident in a way that still impresses you after 9 years. She can dress hair, she has once told you. Almost before I'm properly awake, Your Grace. It's like breathing. Pins go in, pads go in to add height. Curls are arranged at the temples in the current fashion. a ribbon, pale blue to match the gown threaded through the finished architecture. You look at yourself in the glass. What you see is the Duchess of Ashworth, exactly as required. The pale face, the dark eyes, the precise arrangement of hair and fabric and embellishment that communicates clearly and without ambiguity rank and taste and wealth. What you feel is something slightly different from what the mirror shows, but feelings are not, strictly speaking, required. "Thank you, Mary," you say. "I'll have chocolate in the morning room, and ask Mrs. Hatch if she's available to speak with me at 9. "Yes, Your Grace." The letter is in your hand. You've been carrying it since you picked it up at the window. You carry it with you out of the bedchamber, down the corridor, wide enough for 4 people to walk abreast, panelled in light wood, the floorboards underfoot the particular creak and silence of very good old house, and down the main stairs, past the portraits. There are 11 portraits in the main stairwell, every Duke of Ashworth going back to the second one, plus a scattering of duchesses and the occasional celebrated ancestor. They watch you descend, these painted faces, the way they've watched every morning for 9 years. The 7th Duke, your husband's father, is the most prominent. A large canvas halfway down, him in his robes, looking exactly like a man who has never doubted his right to anything. You have never doubted your right to things either. You were raised not to doubt it. You're the daughter of a viscount, which is not a duke, but is quite enough. And you are educated and groomed and presented and eventually married to produce precisely the kind of woman you are. A woman who carries the letter from her husband's solicitor without changing her expression, and descends the staircase with her back straight and her head up, even when there's nobody at all to see her do it. Habit, discipline, whatever you want to call it. The morning room is on the ground floor, east-facing, and this time of year it gets the morning sun through the tall windows that look out onto the square. It smells of the fresh flowers that Jenkins, the head footman, arranges every morning, this time of year usually roses from the kitchen garden at the Ashworth estate in Wiltshire. Except the Duke has been in Wiltshire for 6 weeks and 4 days, and at some point someone forgot to send up the roses and nobody thought to mention it to you until 4 days after the vases went empty, at which point Mrs. Hatch, the housekeeper, was quietly mortified, and the whole thing was sorted without you having to say a single word because Mrs. Hatch has been in service for 31 years and considers empty flower vases a personal failing on the level of original sin. The roses are back, fresh, deep red today. They smell the way roses are supposed to smell, which is to say they smell like the idea of roses, the actual roseness that has become a kind of shorthand for everything that is meant to be pleasant and correct and suitably beautiful. You sit at the small writing desk in the corner, put the letter in front of you, look at it for another moment. The chocolate arrives before you open it. Mary is efficient, or the footman was watching for you, which is the more likely explanation because in a house of 47 people, there is always someone watching for you. And you wrap both hands around the cup and let the warmth travel up into your palms and breathe in the dark, faintly bitter smell of it, and think. Then you open the letter. The letter is from Mr. Fellows, who's been the Ashworth family solicitor for 23 years, and who writes in a hand so crabbed and careful that reading his correspondence requires both good light and significant patience. You read it twice, then you put it down, then you pick it up and read it again, because the second time you need to make sure you've understood the numbers correctly. You have. The estate in Wiltshire, the main estate, the one that has been in the Ashworth family since the reign of Charles II, has a debt attached to it that Mr. Fellows describes, in his careful crabbed hand as a matter requiring your Grace's most urgent attention in the absence of his Grace from town. The amount is not small. You're not a woman who faints at numbers. You never have been, and the habit of your sex in general, or at least the habit that women of your class are supposed to display, which is a kind of helpless blankness in the face of anything involving arithmetic, has always struck you as a cultivated affectation that benefits nobody. Your father taught you to read an account book. Not because he expected you to manage anything, not in 1770s England, but because he was a practical man with no sons, and he found the alternative, raising a daughter who didn't know the difference between a credit and a debit, actively offensive. So you can read the numbers Mr. Fellows has laid out. You understand them perfectly well. What you're less certain about is what you're supposed to do with them, given that your husband is in Wiltshire shooting things and has not written to you in 11 days, and that the last time you raised the subject of the estate's finances, carefully at dinner 6 months ago, he looked at you with that expression and said, "I'll deal with it, Catherine," which is what he says about everything that he doesn't want to discuss, and which has, in 9 years of marriage, meant both "I have dealt with it" and "I have not dealt with it, and have no intention of doing so," in roughly equal measure. The difference you've learned is that you can't always tell which one applies until something arrives from Mr. Fellows. You drink your chocolate. You think. The morning room is quiet. The square outside is beginning to wake up. You can hear it. The distant sound of horses now, the occasional carriage, the vendors who work the streets of Mayfair starting their rounds. Milk. Fresh milk. That's the morning sound. The yell of the milkmaid who comes through the square every morning at 8:30 as regular as the clock. You need to write 3 letters today. One to Mr. Fellows, acknowledging receipt and requesting a meeting. One to your husband in Wiltshire, which you've been composing mentally for 3 days and still haven't decided how to phrase, because the content is straightforward, but the tone is a matter requiring some thought. And one to Lady Pembridge, who's invited you to a card party on Thursday, and whose invitation you've been using as a measuring stick for your own social calendar. Accepting means a particular kind of evening. Declining means a different kind. And both have implications you need to think through before you decide. But first, Mrs. Hatch at 9 o'clock. You're aware, in a way that you could not have articulated 9 years ago when you first came to this house as a new bride, of the precise, complex, occasionally delicate mechanics of managing a household of this size. There is a hierarchy. Jenkins at the head of the male servants, Mrs. Hatch at the head of the female, and then the gradations downward. First footman, second footman, third, the under-butler who's really too young for the position but was given it as a favour to someone now departed. The cook, Mrs. Pierce, who's genuinely excellent and knows it. The lady's maid, the housemaids, the kitchen maids, the laundry maid, the scullery maid. Below stairs there are approximately 20 people in permanent positions. Above stairs there are another 15, give or take, whose roles blur more with family service. Every single one of them has an opinion about you, about the Duke, about the fact that the Duke is not here, about what that means. You know this because you have been observant, and because 9 years of living with people who are trained to be invisible while observing everything has taught you that invisibility runs both ways. They see you. But if you're paying attention, if you're actually paying attention, not performing the grand lady who floats through her own house as if the servants are furniture, you see them too. And what you've been seeing over the past 6 weeks is a particular kind of careful tension. The servants are not distressed, exactly. They're too well trained for distress to show. But there are small things. The way Mrs. Hatch pauses a half-second longer than usual before answering a question about the household accounts. The way Jenkins, who is 15 years in the family service and has the discretion of a confessor, has twice mentioned, ever so gently, that certain suppliers have been asking about payment arrangements. Certain suppliers, payment arrangements. You finish your chocolate, you look again at the letter from Mr. Fellows. You fold it carefully and put it in the small locked drawer of the writing desk, the one that contains things you don't want found by the various people who move through your rooms in the course of their duties. Then you take out paper and begin to write the letter to Mr. Fellows. Your handwriting is good, clear and even, the product of a great deal of enforced practice. The governess who made you walk with a book on your head also made you write out the same sentences over and over until the hand became automatic. An elegant hand, she used to say, is the mark of a lady. You always thought this was a particularly limited definition of what marked a lady, but you've been grateful for the elegant hand more times than you can count, because it means that when you write, the letters come out looking exactly as they're meant to look, and that in itself is a kind of composure, the composure of the thing on the page. You seal the letter, you'll have Jenkins see it delivered today. Then you put your pen down and sit back and look at the roses. They smell beautiful. The room is warm now, the sun through the east windows reaching the carpet, the light golden and clear. Somewhere above you can hear Mary moving, the sound of the room upstairs being prepared, the soft thud of a trunk being moved. Routine of the house, ordinary morning sounds. 6 weeks ago, when your husband left, the household felt, shifted is the word, not bereaved, not abandoned, shifted. The way a ship shifts in the water when a significant weight is transferred from one side to the other, imperceptibly but noticeably to anyone paying attention. The Duke's valet had gone, of course, and his 2 personal footmen, and the grooms who travelled with him. The house is smaller, with them gone in a way that has nothing to do with the actual reduction in population, and everything to do with what their presence represented. The Duke of Ashworth takes up a great deal of space when he is here. This is not metaphorical. He's a large man physically, and he has the quality that some men have, the ones who were raised from birth to occupy the centre of things, of making every room he walks into feel slightly smaller. Not unpleasantly, it's not menace, it's simply presence. The accumulated weight of being a duke for 20 years. The rooms arrange themselves around him. When he's not here, the rooms expand again. You find you breathe slightly more easily when he's away. You find this observation troubling. The clock strikes 9. You hear from the hallway the measured footsteps of Mrs. Hatch. Margaret Hatch has been housekeeper to the Ashworth family for 16 years. She came to them from the Wentworth family in Yorkshire, where she had been an upper housemaid for 4 years before that, and before that a housemaid in service to a clergyman's widow in Harrogate, which is where she began and where, she has once told you, she learned everything of real use that she knows. She is 53 years old. She has the build of a woman who has spent her entire working life on her feet, compact and capable, with strong hands and a posture that rivals your own. Her black dress is exactly right. Her keys hang at her waist with the specific clink that you've learned to distinguish from all the other sounds of the house, and her face is the kind of face that reveals precisely as much as the person wearing it intends to reveal and absolutely nothing else. You've spent 9 years learning to read that face. Right now it shows professional composure, mild concern, and something underneath the concern that might be. That has the shape of relief that you've called this meeting. Good morning, Mrs. Hatch. Good morning, Your Grace. She takes the chair you indicate, straight-backed, hands folded in her lap. The posture of a woman reporting to her employer. You know from long experience that she will not begin until you open the conversation with something specific. I've had a letter from Mr. Fellows, you say. Regarding the accounts. A pause. The half-second pause you've been noticing. Yes, Your Grace. I'd like to see the household accounts for the last quarter. All of them, including the suppliers. Mrs. Hatch is quiet for a moment. Not resistant. She's not a woman who resists, but organising something behind those carefully composed features. I'll have them ready by noon, Your Grace. Thank you. And Mrs. Hatch, the suppliers who have been making inquiries. You watch her face. I'd like a list of those as well. Another pause. It's perhaps not more than 3 or 4, she says carefully. Then a short list. I'll need it by noon as well. Of course, Your Grace. There's a moment in which something shifts between you. It's almost imperceptible. It's the moment in which you've made clear that you know what she knows, and she knows that you know, and the whole careful business of professional discretion steps slightly to one side. It's not quite the same as becoming equals. You'll never be equals, and both of you know it, and neither of you would want that particular fiction. But it's something. An acknowledgement, perhaps, that you're going to deal with this the way an adult deals with things, which Mrs. Hatch has been hoping for, you suspect, for some weeks. His Grace, she begins, then stops. His Grace is in Wiltshire, you say, and I am here, and the household requires management. Yes, Your Grace. Thank you, Mrs. Hatch. That will be all for now. She rises, gives the small curtsy that is her version of a bow, and withdraws. The door closes quietly behind her. You sit for a moment in the morning room with the roses and the chocolate cup, and the Mr. Fellows letter locked in the drawer, and the specific weight of what you've just done. Because what you've just done is taken the household accounts into your own hands, formally, directly, without asking permission. This is not, technically speaking, out of place for a duchess managing a London house in her husband's absence. It is entirely within your sphere. Your mother did it. Her mother did it. The managing of the domestic economy, the household bills, the servants' wages, the suppliers, the seasonal accounting. This has always been the Duchess's domain in theory. In practice, in this house, the accounts have passed through your hands on their way to the Duke for the past 9 years, and the Duke has reviewed them with varying degrees of attention, and occasionally he has made decisions about them, about which suppliers to use, about what was and wasn't worth the expense, and occasionally he has simply signed things without reading them, and the result is the situation that is currently producing letters from Mr. Fellows. So this morning you are, in effect, picking something up from the floor that someone else dropped. The difference is that you're doing it while the floor's original dropper is in Wiltshire, and you haven't told him you're doing it, and you're going to have to write him a letter about it, and the letter will need to be precisely, exactly right in its tone, and you know this, and you know that this knowing, this calculus, you're constantly running about how to say things to him, how to be direct without being perceived as managing him, how to raise a concern without triggering that expression, is one of the things that exhausts you most completely, in a way that has no physical location. But not yet. The letter to your husband later. First, the morning. By 10 o'clock you have written to Mr. Fellows and sealed the envelope and given it to Jenkins, who takes letters with the same expression he takes everything, the expression of a man who has been professionally neutral for so long that he's not sure he has any other setting. Jenkins is 51. He's been in service for 33 years. He came to the Ashworth household as a footman under the previous head footman, a man named Thomas, who retired 8 years ago and died 6 months after that, which Jenkins has mentioned exactly once in your hearing, with the brevity and composure of a man who has learned that grief, like opinions, is something you keep to yourself while in service. He is the best footman you've ever worked with. He's the best footman you've heard described by anyone who knows about footmen, which in your world is quite a few people. He's efficient, discreet, reads situations with a speed and accuracy that would have made him an excellent general or diplomat, and he has twice, to your direct knowledge, saved the household from significant embarrassment by intercepting things, letters, visitors, pieces of information that would have caused problems if they'd reached their intended destinations. He knows about the account situation. He knows about everything, in the way that good butlers and head footmen always know. It's part of the job. He takes the letter for Mr. Fellows and says, "Will there be anything else, Your Grace?" "Have the carriage ready at 2, you say. I'll be calling on Lady Harrington." "Yes, Your Grace." He goes. You reach for the next piece of paper. The letter to Lady Pembridge. The card party on Thursday. You will decline. You have decided this. You decided it as you were sitting with the roses earlier, turning the implications over. Attending Lady Pembridge's card party means a particular kind of evening, a kind you know well. The women arranged around the tables, the conversation running like a second game alongside the cards, information exchanged in the form of observations and questions, the whole thing a social occasion in the formal sense, but underneath it something more like an audit. Who is seen with whom, what is said and not said, the precise calibration of whose social position has risen or fallen since the last gathering. Lady Pembridge herself is not unkind. She's intelligent, actually, which makes her a more interesting danger than someone who's merely malicious. She genuinely enjoys the exchange of information, the mapping of the social terrain, the pleasure of knowing things, and she has known. The whole of Mayfair has known, with the speed that these things travel, that the Duke of Ashworth has been in Wiltshire for 6 weeks without his Duchess, and she will not raise this directly, because that's not how it's done, but it will be present in the room like a guest nobody has formally acknowledged. You're not ready to sit in that room yet, not until you know more, not until you have the accounts and have spoken to Mr. Fellows and have written to your husband and have, in other words, a clearer picture of the landscape. You write to Lady Pembridge with regret. A prior engagement. You look forward to seeing her at the Hartleys on Friday if she's attending, which she almost certainly will be. You seal it. Then you sit for a moment and think about what it means to have a prior engagement on Thursday when you have, as of this moment, no prior engagement on Thursday. It means you have to create one by Thursday. This is not difficult. This is the ordinary business of your life. At 11:15, Mary brings your outdoor things because you've decided between the second letter and the third that you're going to walk. Not far. Not through the city's less pleasant quarters. Just around the square, perhaps, or a turn through the park. It's a beautiful morning. Your body is telling you, through the specific tension between your shoulder blades, that it needs movement. Outside air, a few minutes that are not spent at a writing desk. Your outdoor things consist of, approximately, a pelisse in pale grey wool which goes over the blue morning dress, gloves, a hat which Mary ties under your chin with practised efficiency, and your shoes are changed for ones more suitable for walking, a slightly heavier leather that will manage the pavement. You take your reticule, small, silk, containing a handkerchief, a few coins, and a small folded piece of paper on which you've written 3 things you need to remember to ask Mr. Fellows, and you go downstairs. Jenkins has seen you before you've reached the bottom of the stairs. He has the front door open by the time you arrive. This is part of what you pay him for. You step outside. The air hits you first. The actual Grosvenor Square air, which is better than most of London's air, but still unequivocally London's air, with that coal and horses and city smell underlaid with summer warmth. The sun is high enough now to have taken some of the early chill off the morning, and the square itself, with its central garden and the trees coming into full summer leaf, has a quality that is genuinely pleasant. You begin to walk. There's a pleasure in walking that you've never been quite willing to give up, despite it being faintly odd for a woman of your position. Ladies of your rank are largely expected to travel by carriage. Walking is for those who don't have a carriage, or for morning strolls in the park of precisely the kind you're taking now. But you grew up in Derbyshire, where walking meant actual walking, hills and woods, and the specific freedom of being too far from the house to be easily observed, and that feeling, the feeling of your own legs carrying you forward through open air, is one of the things you have mourned, quietly, for 9 years of London life. You circle the square. 2 other women are walking on the far side, a merchant's wife and her companion, at a guess, out on morning errands. They glance at you and look away, which is the correct response to encountering a duchess on an ordinary morning. You nod slightly in their direction. They probably don't see it. A coalman's cart is making its slow way around the square, the horse fat and patient, the man on the seat heavy-coated despite the weather, his face blackened with his trade. The coal is for someone's house, though not yours. Your coal deliveries happen through the back entrance on a schedule, and the horse's hooves on the cobbles are the percussion of the morning, the particular sound of London that never quite stops. You complete 1 circuit of the square. Your mind, walking, does something it can't do sitting at the writing desk. It moves laterally, turns things over from different angles, lets them fall into new arrangements. The accounts, the letter from Mr. Fellows, the debt, your husband in Wiltshire. The question you haven't asked yourself directly yet, which is, did he know? Did he know about the debt when he left? Did he leave partly because of it? Because it was easier to go to Wiltshire and shoot things than to stay in London and deal with it? You know the answer to this question. You just haven't said it out loud yet. You do another half circuit of the square and then go back inside. Luncheon at 1 o'clock. You eat alone in the small dining room. The large dining room seats 40, which is excessive for one person who's honestly not very hungry anyway. And even the medium dining room is too formal for a solitary lunch when there's nobody to maintain formality for. The small dining room is comfortable. A round table, 4 chairs, a window onto the side street, a fire that takes the edge off even in July. Mrs. Pierce sends up cold meats and bread, and a small dish of some kind of potted thing that is probably excellent, but that you eat with the automatic appreciation of someone whose mind is elsewhere. Jenkins stands. 2 footmen stand. The business of being served a meal you're barely tasting by people who are there specifically to serve it. You have been thinking about the cook. Mrs. Pierce has been with the household for 8 years. She is the best cook you have employed. better than her predecessor, better than several others you've tried in the intervals. And she's also, as a result, aware of her value in a way that the other servants are not. She has been made offers. You know this because she has told you, once, in the particular way she has of telling you things that most servants would not tell their employer, which is directly and without decoration. A family in Portman Square. A very good salary. She did not take it. You've never asked why. You suspect the answer is something to do with the kitchen itself. Mrs. Pierce has opinions about kitchens, strong ones, and the kitchen of this house is an excellent one. But you've also wondered sometimes if it's something else. There are people, you've learned, who stay not because of money or conditions, but because of something harder to name. Whether the lady of the house pays attention, whether she notices, whether she knows the name of the scullery maid, which is Betsy, and that Betsy has a mother in Cheapside who is unwell. You know these things. You have always known these things. My compliments to Mrs. Pierce, you tell Jenkins. Yes, Your Grace. He will tell her, and Mrs. Pierce will receive the compliment with her particular brand of satisfied composure, and this small exchange will do exactly as much work as it does, which is not trivial. These small things add up. The carriage at 2. Lady Harrington in Brook Street, 10 minutes away through the afternoon Mayfair streets. Busy now, the full business of a summer afternoon in the most expensive part of London. The carriages and the sedan chairs and the people moving between houses, the ceaseless circulation of goods and people, and information that is a city at work. Eleanor Harrington is your oldest friend in London. She is not your oldest friend overall. That is Charlotte Vernon, who is in Bath, and has been in Bath for 3 years due to her husband's health, and whom you miss with the specific ache of missing someone who understood something fundamental about you. But Eleanor is your oldest London friend, which is not the same thing, but is still something substantial. You've known her since your first season, which was her 3rd, and which she was kind to you during, in a way that you have never forgotten, and that she, being Eleanor, has forgotten entirely, because the kindness was to her entirely natural, and therefore not worth remembering. She greets you herself in the drawing-room rather than sending her butler, which is Eleanor's way. She has never stood much on ceremony in private, which is one of the things you value about her. You look tired, she says. This is also Eleanor's way. Most people would say how lovely to see you. Eleanor says what she sees. I received a letter from Mr. Fellows this morning, you say. Because with Eleanor you don't have to work up to things. She makes a face. Not a shocked face, as she's not easily shocked, but a face that registers understanding. The estate? Among other things. You sit. Tea is brought. Eleanor dismisses the maid with the efficiency of a woman who means to have a real conversation. Her drawing-room is warm and slightly untidy in a way your own drawing-room is never quite allowed to be. Books on the chairs, a piece of needlework abandoned on the arm of the sofa, a dog asleep on the hearthrug with the absolute conviction of a dog who knows nobody is going to shift him. How bad? Eleanor asks. I don't know yet. I'll have the household accounts at noon. A pause. I imagine moderately bad. James? James is your husband. In Eleanor's company you sometimes use first names, quietly, as if the informality is a small act of privacy. Is in Wiltshire, has been for 6 weeks. Eleanor looks at you. She's 51 years old, has been widowed for 4 years, has 3 adult children, and has the particular freedom of a woman who has stopped calculating the effect of her expression on other people. Is he coming back? She asks. For the autumn season, presumably. I mean, is he coming back? A slight emphasis on the last word. You're quiet for a moment. The dog on the hearthrug snores softly. The fire crackles. I don't know, you say. This is the most honest thing you've said to anyone in 6 weeks. Eleanor nods. She doesn't push it further. She knows, with the specific knowledge of a woman who was in a marriage for 27 years that was not without its complications, when someone needs to be heard rather than advised. The season is nearly over anyway, she says after a moment. Another 6 weeks and everyone goes to the country. Yes. So it becomes simply the ordinary arrangement. Yes. The ordinary arrangement. The Duke in Wiltshire, the Duchess in London for the winter, then the whole cycle of calling, assembly, opera, card party, dinner, all of it without him. Not unusual. Married couples of your class spend a great deal of time not together. By design, by habit, by the demands of estates and clubs and hunting, and the whole elaborate geography of a life that is lived partly in public and partly in the private arrangements that nobody discusses. The ordinary arrangement, except for the letter from Mr. Fellows, except for the suppliers asking about payment, except for the 11 days with no letter from your husband, which is longer than his previous silences, but not so much longer that you can make anything definitive of it. I need to write him a letter, you say. Yes, Eleanor agrees. About the accounts. And about the other thing. You pick up your tea. It's exactly right. Strong enough. Hot enough. I don't know what the other thing is precisely, you say. So it's difficult to write about it. Eleanor is quiet. There is a woman in Wiltshire, you say, finally. Eleanor is still quiet. I'm not certain, you add. I have no evidence of anything specific. It's a feeling, and feelings are not evidence. No, Eleanor says. But they're usually right, you nod. You drink your tea. The dog shifts on the hearthrug and goes back to sleep. What are you going to do? Eleanor asks. Manage the household accounts, you say. Write to Mr. Fellows. Write to James about the estate finances. Get through the Hartleys' dinner on Friday. A pause. In that order. Eleanor looks at you for a moment with the expression she has that is the nearest thing she has to sympathy. Not soft sympathy. Not the kind that asks nothing of you, but a firmer kind. The kind that recognises what you're doing and doesn't pretend it's easy. You should come to the park with me tomorrow morning, she says. Ride if you want. Mrs. Sullivan is bringing her mare and you haven't been on a horse in 2 months, you say. 2 months. That's unreasonable. Come. I'll come, you say, and mean it. Back in the carriage at 4, heading home. The street still busy in the afternoon sun. The light is different now. Afternoon light through London haze, slightly gold, slightly thick. You look out the window. This is something you do. Look out of carriage windows and watch the city move past. You did it 9 years ago when you first came to London as a new duchess, and everything was strange and overwhelming, and you do it now when London is as familiar as the blue curtains in your bedroom. The watching is different now. When it was new, you watched with the slightly panicked attention of someone trying to memorize an examination. Now you watch the way you watch something you know, looking not for information, but for something harder to name. Evidence of being in the world. Proof that the world continues. The streets between Brook Street and Grosvenor Square are short and familiar. You pass a milliner's whose window you've looked into 100 times without ever going in. A print shop with engravings in the window. A man selling something from a tray who is conducting a loud negotiation with a potential customer who doesn't look like he's going to buy anything. The carriage turns the corner and there is your house. Grosvenor Square. Number 11. 47 servants and a locked drawer with a letter in it, and the smell of roses in the morning room, and the silence of a very large house, with only one person who matters sleeping in it. You go in. The afternoon passes in the particular way that afternoons in a large house pass when there is work to be done, and the work is of the mental kind. The kind that looks like sitting at a desk but is actually the expenditure of a great deal of energy, just not in any direction that produces visible sweat. At 5, Mrs. Hatch brings the accounts. She brings them in a leather folder, pages in neat order, her own handwriting at the top of each section marking what it covers. She has been keeping these accounts for 16 years, and they are, whatever else is wrong with the household's finances, models of clarity. Columns lined up precisely. Numbers neat. Every entry cross-referenced. You go through them at the writing table with the methodical attention that numbers require. Page by page, quarter by quarter. The ordinary household expenses, the servants' wages, paid quarterly, solid and expected. The food bills, which are high, but not unreasonably so for a household this size eating this well. The coals, the candles, the laundry, the various maintenance and repair expenses that any building this old and this large produces with clockwork regularity. And then the other expenses, the ones that don't quite fit the ordinary pattern. There are several payments over the past year to people and businesses you don't recognise. They're not large, individually, but they occur at irregular intervals, with no pattern you can immediately identify, and they're not accompanied by the usual note of service or goods rendered. They're just payments out, money that went somewhere. You mark them with a small pencil dot. There are 9 of them. Then there are the suppliers. A coal merchant in Southwark who is owed £87. A wine merchant in St. James's, a good one, one of the best, and the amount owed to him is significant, who has apparently extended credit in a way that has been allowed to run too long. A linen draper on Oxford Street, a moderate sum. A stable in Knightsbridge that handles the overflow horses when your own stables are full, owed for 6 months of service. Mrs. Hatch has put all of these in her neat handwriting. She has also included a brief note in her careful way that does not say what it means, but that you understand perfectly. These accounts represent household expenditure to my knowledge, and may not reflect all accounts payable in His Grace's name. In His Grace's name. There are things that go through the household accounts, and things that go through the Duke's personal accounts, handled by his own secretary, a man named Graves, who came with the position, and whom you've always found opaque in a way that is distinct from the ordinary opacity of servants. Graves is loyal to the Duke in a way that has no room in it for any other loyalty, which is entirely appropriate for a personal secretary, and which means that your knowledge of what comes and goes through the Duke's personal finances is limited to what the Duke chooses to tell you, which is approximately nothing. You add up the 9 marked payments, then add the supplier debts, then try, with the information you have, to make sense of the picture. The picture you have is incomplete, but what you can see suggests that the household has been running a shortfall for at least a year, maybe longer, and that the shortfall has been covered by credit, by suppliers waiting, by payments deferred, in the way that shortfalls often are, right up until the moment that the credit runs out and the whole thing needs to be addressed all at once. You close the folder. Your neck aches. You've been bent over the pages for 2 hours and the candles have been brought in while you were reading, which means it's later than you realised. The summer evening having slipped past without your noticing. Mary brings your evening things. You dress for dinner. Dinner alone, but you dress for it anyway, because you always dress for dinner. because it's the kind of discipline that holds things together. The dinner dress is dark green silk, a colour you've always found suits you better than the pale blues and whites that fashion tends to recommend for women of your colouring. The stays are relaced, tighter for evening than morning. More jewellery, a pearl necklace that was your mother's, which you wear when you need to feel competent. Dinner is served at 7. Soup, fish, a roast, vegetables. Mrs. Pierce's cooking, as always, excellent. You eat more than you did at lunch. Hunger you didn't register earlier making itself known now. Jenkins stands, the footmen stand. You think about the 9 payments. After dinner you go to the library. The library is the room in this house that you have, over 9 years, most completely made your own. It's not the largest room, not the grandest, but it's on the 2nd floor, north-facing, with a window that looks out over the garden side of the square rather than the street, which means it's quieter. The shelves go from floor to ceiling, 12 feet, and they're full, properly full. Not the kind of full that is books chosen for their spines as decoration, but books that have been read, placed back in roughly organised order, some with paper slips in them marking pages, some with marginalia that predates you and that you've read alongside the original text for 9 years. The previous Duke, your husband's father, the one in the portrait, was a reader. His son is not particularly, but he's inherited the library along with the house and the name and the position, and the library has become yours by default. You've been reading your way through it for 9 years. You're probably 2/3 done. Tonight you take down something familiar. You need tonight the comfort of something you've read before, not the challenge of something new. And you sit in the chair by the window that has become, over 9 years, specifically your chair, and you read. The house settles around you. The sounds diminish as the evening goes on. Candles appear in windows up and down the square. The sounds of the day fade into the sounds of evening. The book is Fielding. Tom Jones. You've read it 3 times. It is, among other things, about the considerable difference between what people appear to be and what they actually are, and about how the distance between those two things is both the engine of most of life's comedy and most of life's tragedy. You find this, at 31, more interesting than you did at 22. At 10:30 you put it down. Mary comes when you ring to help you undress. The stays loosen. The relief is physical and immediate. Air going places it hasn't been for 14 hours, ribs expanding to their actual dimensions. You press your hands flat against your stomach and breathe and feel your body remember what it is when nobody's looking. Mary, you say, Your Grace. Is the household settled, generally? A small pause. Mary is 26, has been your lady's maid for 3 years, and is careful and competent and occasionally says things that are more perceptive than people expect. We're a bit uncertain, Your Grace, she says, not cautiously, just honestly. About what's to happen. With His Grace away so long, it's not that anyone says anything, Your Grace, but there's a feeling. Yes, you say. I know. Mrs. Hatch says you've asked for the accounts. I have. A pause. The brush moves through your hair. The others will be relieved, I think, Your Grace. Good, you say. Tell them so if it comes up. Mary makes no direct acknowledgement of this, but her hands in your hair are slightly warmer than a moment ago. Or maybe that's your imagination. Good night, then. The fire in the bedchamber banked down. The blue curtains drawn, the dowager's curtains, the darkness complete. You lie flat on your back in the middle of the enormous bed. not on your side, not curled toward the cold space on the other side. Flat in the centre, arms at your sides, the way you sleep now, which is not the way you slept 9 years ago. Tomorrow, the letter to your husband. You wake at 5 again. This morning you don't immediately review your circumstances. You lie in the dark and listen to the house breathing, and you allow yourself for the length of time it takes the clock to strike 1/4 past the hour to simply be here, in the dark, in the warm, without performing anything for anyone. The house at 5 in the morning. Somewhere in the servants' quarters there's movement already. The kitchen maid beginning the day's first work. A fire being laid somewhere. The particular sound of coals being added to a grate. The soft shifting fall of them. Through the window, even through the blue curtains, the city is already audible. The watchman's distant call from 2 streets over, marking the hour. A horse somewhere, a door. You grew up in Derbyshire in a house that was silent at night. Truly silent. The silence of the countryside, which is never quite silence, which has owls and wind and the occasional distant dog, but is silence in comparison to any city. You found London's constant noise almost unbearable when you first arrived. Now you find the silence in Derbyshire when you visit slightly unnerving, as if the city has permanently changed your calibration. The thing about Eleanor's question, is he coming back, the emphasis on the last word, is that it contains 2 questions. The obvious one, is he coming back to London from Wiltshire? And the other one, the one beneath it, the one Eleanor meant, is he coming back to you, to the marriage, to this bed, to the arrangement that has been your life for 9 years? You don't know the answer to either question. What you know is what you said to Eleanor, that there is a woman in Wiltshire. You have no specific evidence. You have a certain letter that was left on the desk in your husband's study, not sealed, that you were not intended to see. He did not think you would go into his study, which he keeps largely locked, but which the footman left unlocked when he went in to clean. And the letter you saw was not explicit, not incriminating in any concrete sense, but it had a tone. The tone of a correspondence that has been going on for a while. The tone of a correspondence between people who understand each other. You sealed the letter and left it on the desk exactly where you found it. You did not mention it to your husband. You have not mentioned it to anyone except Eleanor. This is a choice you made. The choice is not precisely about dignity, though dignity is part of it. It's more about information. You wanted to be sure before you said anything. You wanted to understand the shape of the thing before you attempted to deal with it. And also, you're honest about this, in the dark of the early morning, you were afraid. Not of him exactly, not in that way. Your husband is not a violent man. He is not cruel in the direct sense. He is distant, and he is often dismissive, and he says, "I'll deal with it, Catherine," as a means of ending conversations. And he looks at you sometimes with that particular expression that makes you feel you've said something incomprehensible. But these are the ordinary bruises of a marriage that was made, like most marriages of your kind, without particular reference to love. What you're afraid of is the answer, the confirmation, the moment when what has been possible becomes real. Because real is different. Real is a door that closes. The clock on the mantelpiece strikes 6. You get up. The letter to your husband takes 3 drafts. The first draft is too direct. You read it back, and you can hear what a reader would hear. A woman who is frightened and trying not to show it, which makes for a particular kind of strained formality that tells the reader exactly what you're trying to conceal. burn that one. This second draft is too soft. You write around the accounts entirely, mention the letter from Mr. Fellows in a subordinate clause, ask him to return to London at his earliest convenience. It reads like a letter from someone who doesn't want to have the conversation she needs to have, which is accurate but not useful. The third draft takes the better part of an hour. You write it at the library desk, the accounts folder open to one side, your notes from yesterday's reading on the other, and you write the letter in the methodical way you do difficult things, making sure each sentence says exactly what you mean it to say. Dear James, I have received a letter from Mr. Fellows regarding a matter affecting the Wiltshire estate, a copy of which I enclose. I have also reviewed the household accounts for the past quarter and have identified several matters requiring clarification. I would be grateful if you could indicate when you expect to return to London, as I believe these matters would be best addressed in person. In the meantime, I will write to Mr. Fellows to arrange a preliminary meeting at which I will represent your interests in your absence. I hope the shooting is well. The weather in London has been good. Catherine, you read it over. It's not warm, it is also not hostile. It says exactly what it needs to say. The phrase, I will write to Mr. Fellows to arrange a preliminary meeting at which I will represent your interests in your absence, is doing considerable work. It is informing rather than asking, and you have constructed it carefully enough that he cannot read it as challenge without effort. But it says what it says. You seal it. You sit back and notice that your hands are slightly cold, and that you've been pressing the pen harder than necessary, because there are 2 small ink marks on the side of your middle finger that weren't there before. The ride in the park with Eleanor happens at 10 the following morning. She's waiting at the gate of Hyde Park with Mrs. Sullivan, who is, as described, bringing a grey mare of very even temperament, and a groom, and Eleanor's own horse, a solid bay, who has accompanied her through most of her widowhood. You are on your own horse, a dark chestnut called Bramble, who was given to you by your father when you married, and who is not young now but is still quick enough, and who knows you better than most people do. Hyde Park in the morning smells like cut grass and something slightly earthy and faintly of the serpentine, which is not always a pleasant smell, but which is the smell of open water in a city, and which you have always found, despite everything, a relief. Mrs. Sullivan is excellent company. She is the wife of a judge, 40 years old, with the dry humour of someone who has spent a great deal of time listening to other people's cases. She's telling a story about a visit to a neighbour's house that involves a terrifying dog and a misplaced wig, and a footman who saved the day with extraordinary presence of mind. You laugh. Genuinely. The laugh surprised you a little. You realised, hearing it, that it's been some days since you laughed. The horses move at an easy trot, the 3 women side by side on the wide path, the grass green on either side, the trees in full summer leaf. The movement is good. Your body, after 2 months of not being on a horse, finds the rhythm of it quickly. The balance, the adjustment, the small communications between rider and horse that are, when they're working, a kind of conversation. Before you started riding again, you'd forgotten how much of riding is physical trust. The horse under you isn't performing anything. He's simply there, doing what he does, his barrel sides warm against your legs, his ears pricked forward, his breath coming in the regular rhythm of an animal that has decided this is a good enough way to spend a morning. There is something fundamentally honest about a horse, about this particular horse, who has no opinion about the household accounts, or the letter from Mr. Fellows, or the woman in Wiltshire. You feel, on Bramble's back at a trot through Hyde Park, something you haven't felt in some weeks. Like yourself. Slightly more, at least, like yourself. Eleanor rides close to you. You look better than yesterday, she says quietly. I wrote the letter. Good. I also found 9 payments I can't account for in the household accounts. Eleanor makes a sound that is not quite a word. They're not large, you say, individually, but I need to ask Graves about them. Can you ask Graves directly? You consider this. I can ask formally, you say, in writing. He'll have to respond to a written request. Will he? If he wants his position to continue existing, yes. Eleanor makes the sound again. It might be approval. You ride. Mrs. Sullivan has moved ahead a little, and is managing her grey mare who has opinions about a particular tree. The judge's wife handles her with calm competence, neither forcing nor ignoring. I've been thinking, you say, Eleanor waits. Eleanor, about what happens if the estate debt is as large as I'm beginning to think it might be. The implications. For the household? For everything. A pause. I had a dowry. Not enormous, but not small either. There are settlements. Yes. Those settlements are technically mine, not his. Eleanor is very quiet now. I would need Mr. Fellows to clarify exactly what the arrangements are, and I would need a solicitor of my own, not the Ashworth solicitor, someone independent. You're thinking carefully, Eleanor says. I'm being sensible, you say. I haven't decided anything, but I want to understand what I'm working with. The morning light shifts as a cloud passes the sun, and the whole park goes grey for a moment, then comes back. The woman in Wiltshire, Eleanor says, and the money, do you think they're connected? You've been thinking about this too. Money covers a great deal, you say, especially if the money was never meant for household accounts. Oh, Eleanor says. Yes, you say. You ride for another few minutes in silence. I'm not going to fall apart, you say after a while. I know, Eleanor says. I want to be clear about that. Whatever I'm dealing with, I'm not the kind of woman who falls apart. I know, Eleanor says again, in a tone that acknowledges this is true, and also acknowledges that knowing you're not going to fall apart is not the same as saying the situation isn't hard. But I'm glad you made me come riding, you say. She looks at you sidelong. You look like yourself again, she says. I feel slightly more like myself, you agree. The Hartleys' dinner on Friday. The evening dress, deep wine red, a colour that was almost daring when you wore it first 3 years ago and is now accepted as one of your signatures. The pearl necklace of your mother's, longer earrings than daytime, your hair done high and dressed with a paste ornament in the current fashion. The stays laced firmly and the discomfort of them something you've accepted as the price of the public face. Lady Hartley is at the door. Your Grace. A genuine warmth here. You, like Caroline Hartley, have always found her intelligent and generous in the ways that matter. We're so pleased you could come. I heard the Duke is in Wiltshire. The shooting, you say, with the appropriate smile. He's been having a fine season. And you're in. 30 people at dinner. You're seated as the ranking woman present at the host's right hand. The man on your left is someone you don't know. Mr. Fitzwilliam, you catch the introduction, perhaps 45, has the look of someone who has spent time outdoors, makes his introduction with a confidence that is not aggressive. I believe you're the Duchess of Ashworth, he says. I am. I grew up not far from your husband's estate in Wiltshire. Long time ago now. Beautiful country. By the fish course you find he has views on the French situation, the revolution, that are more nuanced than you expect. He's not alarmed in the simple way that most of the room is alarmed, not convinced that the English lower orders will rise in sympathy. He thinks the English are fundamentally different in their revolutionary temperature for structural reasons, involving the parish system and the nature of common law. You find this interesting. You say so. He seems surprised that you find it interesting. This is the particular dance of being a woman with views at a dinner table in 1792. You're allowed to have them, in theory. The reality is that when you express them with any confidence, you observe a slight recalibration in the face of whomever you're talking to, a reassessment, a new file being opened. My husband, you say, thinks it will be over by spring. And you? I think the French have had enough of being governed badly, you say. The spring is optimistic. A pause. He looks at you with a more direct attention than he had 3 minutes ago. What does the Duke say to that? The Duke, you say, with precisely the right smile, is in Wiltshire shooting things. Mr. Fitzwilliam laughs. Genuinely, you turn to speak to Lord Hartley. After dinner, the women withdraw. The drawing room, tea. The conversation becomes, in the absence of men, simultaneously more personal and more guarded. Mrs. Alderton is here, a woman of perhaps 65 who's been a permanent fixture of this world for as long as you can remember, who has outlasted 4 different political administrations and 2 royal scandals, and who knows more about everyone in the room than they know about themselves. She sits herself beside you with the purposefulness of a woman who has decided she's going to say something. How is the Duke? She asks. Very well, I believe. In Wiltshire. For the season, yes. The shooting season in July. A slight pause. Mrs. Alderton knows perfectly well that the formal shooting season does not begin until August. He must be quite dedicated. He loves the country, you say. Mrs. Alderton looks at you with the bright, sharp eyes of someone who has spent 65 years watching people carefully. The country has its consolations, she says, and then, as if this were a completely separate subject, have you spoken with young Lady Ashworth lately, your husband's cousin's wife? Not recently. I should call. She's been rather visible, I understand, in Wiltshire circles lately. A beat. I'm glad she's enjoying the summer, you say. Mrs. Alderton nods, satisfied apparently with having said what she came to say. She turns the conversation to a safer topic, the new fashion for Spencer jackets, which she finds ridiculous. And you agree with her with half your attention while the other half sits quietly with what she's just told you. Young Lady Ashworth. Your husband's cousin is a widower with an estate 20 miles from yours in Wiltshire. Young Lady Ashworth is perhaps 24. You've met her twice. She is pretty in the fragile, specific way of very young women, and she has the look of someone who has been told she's charming so many times she's begun to perform it. She's been rather visible in Wiltshire circles. You file this away. You continue the conversation about Spencer jackets. In the carriage home, at 11:30, you look out the window at the dark London streets and feel the exhaustion of the evening settling over you like something physical. The streets are still busy. This hour on a Friday, the city at its most alive, the theatre crowds mingling with the dinner party overflow, the coffee houses glowing, carriages and hackney cabs threading through the streets. You feel, under the exhaustion, something sharper. Mrs. Alderton was telling you something. Not everything she knows. She never tells everything she knows. But something. A confirmation, perhaps, of what you already suspected. Young Lady Ashworth. You had wondered, when you found the letter in the study. You had not been certain enough to name a person. Now you are more certain, and you find, in the carriage going home through the London night, that what you feel about being more certain is complex. Not simple grief, though grief is part of it. Not simple rage, though that's there too, somewhere below the surface. Something harder to name, something that has the shape of finally, as if the thing has been known without being known, and now the knowing is complete. And there is a kind of relief in that, even as there is everything else. The carriage turns into Grosvenor Square, number 11. The lights on in the entrance hall. Jenkins waiting. He opens the door before you reach it. "Good evening, Your Grace." "Good evening, Jenkins. A good evening here." "Quiet, Your Grace. Mr. Graves sent a letter in the afternoon. I've put it in the library." You go still for a half-second. Then you keep moving, taking your gloves off as you go. "Thank you. Good night, Jenkins." The library. The letter on the desk. The letter from Graves is brief. It is, in its way, a masterpiece of the art of saying nothing while technically answering the question asked. He has enumerated the payments you asked about. They are described as personal expenses of His Grace's account for the period indicated. No further information provided. He remains, as always, Your Grace's most obedient. Personal expenses of His Grace's account. You sit at the library desk with the letter in your hand and read it twice. Then you open the drawer and look at your own list of the 9 payments from the household accounts. Then you put them side by side. The dates don't exactly match, but they correspond in a way. The household payments and Graves's personal account payments cluster around the same periods. Irregular, as you thought. Not monthly, not on any regular schedule. Travel, possibly. Someone travelling. Expenses associated with travel. Or gifts. Jewellers do not generally invoice through household accounts unless the jewellery is for the house. There is, you notice now. You missed it yesterday. A payment on Mrs. Hatch's list that is to a name you don't recognise, described only as G. Atkins, Oxford Street. And the amount is not large, but is not nothing. Oxford Street. Goldsmiths in Oxford Street. You sit with this for a long moment. Then you close both letters in the drawer together, and you blow out the library candle and you go to bed. Saturday. You wake, as always, at 5. This morning you lie in the dark and listen to the house breathing, and you allow yourself, for the length of time it takes the clock to strike 1/4 the hour, to simply be here, in the dark, in the warm, without performing anything for anyone. It is, in the year 1792, an extraordinary luxury to be what you are. You know this. You know the alternative. Know it not in a theoretical way, but in the particular way that comes from paying attention to the women around you. The women in the household you manage, who work from before 6 in the morning until after 10 at night for wages that are adequate and no more, who live in attic rooms they share with 3 others, who have almost no choice about anything that happens to them. The women in the streets outside your window, the milkmaid, the vendors, the women who appear sometimes in the darker streets at certain hours for reasons that nobody discusses in your world. And then there's you. You are a duchess. You have significant wealth, at least in principle. You have authority over a large household. You have, as of this week, been exercising that authority with a directness that has apparently been noticeable. You have a solicitor, the Ashworth solicitor, and soon, you think, one of your own. You have Eleanor, you have the library, you have Bramble the horse. You have also, as of last night, confirmed that your husband has been conducting an expensive relationship with his cousin's widow, the money for which has been coming out of accounts that include, at least partially, your household, and that the estate debt that Mr. Fellows is worrying about is at least partly connected to this. You hold this in your mind, and then you decide what you're going to do about it. Sunday morning, church. This is non-negotiable in the sense that it is visible. The Duchess of Ashworth in her pew at St. George's, Hanover Square, is something that the parish has expected every Sunday for 9 years, and will note the absence of with the gentle iron persistence of English social observation. You go. You sit in the pew that has the Ashworth name on it. You listen to a sermon about duties and obligations with the appropriate expression. Beside you, in the pew, the empty space where the Duke would sit, you are aware of it as if it had weight. After the service on the steps of St. George's, you speak to 3 people in the manner of Sunday morning after church. Brief exchanges, pleasant, inconsequential on the surface and performing their social function exactly. Then you get back in the carriage and go home. Sunday afternoon. The square's central garden, your key in the lock. You walk the paths between the beds of summer flowers and the trees at their fullest and greenest, and you think. The square's garden is, in the afternoon, occupied by several other inhabitants of the square and their children and dogs. You nod to the people you know, avoid the conversations that would require more than brief pleasantness, but you are outside, in air that is, in the middle of the garden, a few degrees cleaner than the street air, and you are walking. A bee lands on a lavender stem near the path. You stop to watch it work. The small legs, the deliberate movement from flower to flower, the absolute concentration of a creature doing exactly what it is designed to do. You've been so busy this week that you haven't noticed the summer. You walk for another 20 minutes in the garden and then go back inside. Wednesday. Mr. Fellows. His office is in Lincoln's Inn Fields, which is a different London from the London of Grosvenor Square. Not a worse London, necessarily, just a more working London. The streets around the Inns of Court busy with the particular traffic of the legal profession. Lawyers and clerks and clients and bailiffs and the whole machinery of the law moving through narrow streets with the purposefulness of people with things to do. Mr. Fellow's office is on the 2nd floor of a building that smells, as legal offices do, of paper and dust, and the particular chemical smell of old ink. His clerk takes your name and your card, the card that says Duchess of Ashworth, which always produces a specific effect in rooms like this one, a slight adjustment of posture, a refocusing of attention, and shows you in within 2 minutes, which is faster than you've been kept waiting before. Mr. Fellows is exactly as he has always appeared in 23 years of service to the Ashworth family, crabbed and careful and small, with the look of a man who has spent his career in rooms full of paper and who has taken on some of their qualities. He is 72. He has been doing this for 50 years. He bows. He shows you to the chair across from his desk. He sits. "Your Grace," he says, "I'm glad you were able to come. I'm glad you wrote," you say. "I should have asked for a meeting sooner." A pause. Mr. Fellows has the quality that very good solicitors have, of being able to use a pause as punctuation. This pause says, "Yes, you should have." "The estate," you say. "Tell me the full picture." And he does. The full picture takes the better part of an hour and involves several documents being spread across the desk between you. You go through them methodically, asking questions when you need to, which is often. Mr. Fellows answers with the thoroughness of a man who has been hoping for exactly this conversation. The full picture is not catastrophic. This is the first thing you establish, because it was the thing you most needed to know. The estate is not about to default. The debt is substantial, more than the letter suggested once everything is included. But it's the kind of debt that has solutions. structured solutions, requiring attention and management and possibly the sale of certain additional assets, but solutions. The reasons for the debt are, as you suspected, varied. Some are the ordinary inefficiencies of an estate managed at a distance for too long. Some are investment decisions that didn't perform as expected. And some are— Mr. Fellows produces this with the care of a man who knows exactly what he's producing. Some are personal expenses of the Duke that were charged against the estate rather than against the personal accounts. Personal expenses. Perhaps a third of the total debt. Mr. Fellows, you say, the estate and the household are separate. The household accounts are in my management. The personal accounts are not. My question for you is, what access do I have, legally, under the marriage settlements, to information about the personal accounts, and what authority do I have to require the repayment to the household of funds that were incorrectly directed? Mr. Fellows does not look surprised by this question. He looks, if anything, slightly relieved. He answers it precisely. The marriage settlements, it turns out, give you more than you'd realised. Your father was not careless about these things, but the precise legal machinery of what's yours and what's his and what falls in the middle, this has been, for 9 years, an abstraction, a piece of paper, something you understood in general terms without having tested it. By the time you leave Mr. Fellows's office, you understand it in specific terms. You sit in the carriage going back through the Inns of Court to Mayfair, and you look out the window and you feel very precisely the feeling of a door opening. Not a drama, not a theatrical moment, just a door. And behind it, not a cliff, not a catastrophe, just more room than you thought you had. 2 days after the meeting with Mr. Fellows, a letter arrives from Wiltshire. Not from your husband, from his cousin's widow. This requires a moment. You turn the letter over in your hands, looking at the handwriting, which you recognise from notes connected with family gatherings, and you sit down at the writing desk before you open it. The letter is brief. It is the briefest letter, perhaps, that you have ever received, which under the circumstances is correct. It is an apology. Not, you notice, a denial. Just an apology. A brief and clearly expensive to write apology, in which the word sorry appears 3 times, and the word mistake appears twice, and in which there is no direct description of what's being apologised for, because both of you know what it is. The last paragraph says, I am writing to you because it is right to do so, not because he knows I am writing, and because I want you to know that I intend to leave Wiltshire. You read the letter 3 times, then you fold it carefully and put it in the locked drawer. You sit for a moment in the morning room with the roses. Mrs. Hatch has changed them, deep pink this week, and you think, the letter is not what you expected. You expected nothing, in fact. Someone has talked. Someone always talks. She's 24. She's a widow. She's made a mistake that is partly not hers to have made alone, and she has written to you because she thought it was right. That counts for something. You will not write back, not yet. There's nothing to say yet. But you will keep the letter, and you will not pretend you haven't read it. And whatever comes next will include in its accounting that she did this. 3 days after the letter, your husband arrives in London, not announced. Not with the letter you requested and that he has not sent. He simply arrives, the carriage in the street, James the coachman helping with luggage, the sound of the house shifting into its Duke present mode. You are in the library when Jenkins comes to tell you. His Grace has arrived, Your Grace. Thank you, Jenkins. You put your book down. You take one breath. You go to the drawing room. James Harworth, Duke of Ashworth, is standing in the centre of the drawing room when you walk in. He is tall, as he always is, the particular height and presence of a man who was raised to occupy space. He has been in the country, which shows in his colour, and he has the look of a man who has made a decision about something and is conducting himself accordingly. "Catherine," he says. "James," you say. You look at each other across the drawing room. The dowager's curtains are open. Mid-afternoon, good light, the room warm with it. The roses on the side table are the deep pink variety. The clock on the mantelpiece ticks. "You received my letter," you say. "I did." "And Mr. Fellows had written to you also." "Also," a pause. "I assume," he says, "that you've met with Fellows yourself." "Wednesday." He nods. He is not, interestingly, performing the expression, the incomprehensible expression. He is considering. You watch him do it. "I also," you say carefully, "have received a letter from your cousin's widow." Something moves across his face. It's the most honest expression you've seen from him in a very long time. "Catherine, I'm not asking for an explanation today," you say. "I'm not. James, I am not in the business of making scenes. You know that about me. You've known that for 9 years. He is quiet. "What I would like," you say, "is to have a conversation, a real one, about the estate and the accounts and what is going to happen going forward. Not today, if you need time, but soon." A beat. "All right," he says. "I've requested information from Mr. Graves about the personal accounts," you say. His response indicated personal expenses. The household accounts have gaps that correspond. I'd like those reconciled. He looks at you for a moment with something that isn't the incomprehensible expression. It's something older, something underneath. "I didn't think you'd look at the accounts," he says. "I know," you say. "You've always—" He stops. "I have always managed the household," you say. "I've managed it well. I would have managed everything else well too, had I been given the information. I'm going to need the information, James, going forward." He's quiet for a long time. "Is there something left," he says finally, "between us? Is there anything for me to—" "I don't know yet," you say honestly. "But I think we need to know what we're working with before we decide anything about that." He nods. The nod of a man who's been expecting something harder than this, and is uncertain whether to be relieved or more worried. "Tea?" you say. "Yes," he says. "Thank you." You ring for Jenkins. That evening, alone in the library, the Duke in his study, the house managing the specific adjustment of his return, you sit in your chair by the window and look at the square below, dark now except for the lamplighter who has been and gone, the small islands of candlelight in windows. You think about what you said this afternoon, about what you didn't say, about the conversation you're going to have, probably more than once, about the estate and the money and the woman in Wiltshire and the 9 years of marriage and what is left of them worth the keeping. You don't know the answer to that question. You said so, and you meant it. What you know is this. You came into this house 9 years ago as a 22-year-old girl with a letter of introduction and a very good posture and almost no real knowledge of what she was walking into. You walked in and found a house and a name and a husband and a set of obligations and a library and 47 people, and you have been, since that moment, learning. You've been learning how this works, how a household runs, how accounts balance, how servants think, how a dinner table works, and what it means to walk into a room and have the room adjust around you, and what it means to be watched always and to never quite be seen. And here is what you've learned. Sitting in the library at 11 o'clock at night, you are not the woman you were 9 years ago. The woman you were 9 years ago married a duke and understood that to mean something about what she was and what she would be. And it did mean all those things. But you've learned, specifically this week, that the frame is larger than you've been using. You reach for the book and you read for an hour. At midnight you go to bed. The blue curtains close. The clock ticks. Somewhere below, the house makes its small nighttime sounds. The autumn comes as it always does, gradually and then suddenly one morning when you step outside and the air has changed its character entirely. Still warm in the middle of the day, but cool at the edges. The light different. The quality of the sky altered. And you know without being told that the summer is over. This is the change of season that means, in your world, the annual migration. London empties. The carriages heading north and west and south. The families going to their country seats. You're going to Wiltshire. This is the decision that was arrived at over a series of conversations through August and September. Not dramatic conversations, not the kind that involve raised voices or tears, but real conversations, more real than most of the previous 9 years' worth, in which things were actually said. Things said. The estate debt has a repayment arrangement now, worked out between the Duke, Mr. Fellows, and your own solicitor. Yes, your own solicitor, whose name is Hartington, and who has been, as Eleanor promised, both competent and discreet. The personal accounts are on the table. The woman in Wiltshire has, as her letter said, gone to a cousin in Bath. And you find you bear her less ill feeling than you expected, which is perhaps not entirely rational, but is what it is. Things not said. Everything that 9 years has built up between two people who are never quite suited to each other, and who have managed that unsuitability by performing their respective roles with great competence and very little actual communication. Those things are still in the walls, settling into the architecture the way damp does. Maybe they come out eventually. Maybe they don't. Maybe the right amount of honesty is the amount that gets two people living in the same house without causing each other daily harm. And the rest is the thing you carry privately. You don't know yet. You're finding out. What you do know is that you're going to Wiltshire with all of that, with the knowledge and the accounts and the solicitor and the things not said and the things that are now on the table. And you're going as someone who understands what she's walking into, not as the 22-year-old girl with the letter of introduction, as the woman you are now. You pack for Wiltshire with the efficiency of long practice. Mary knows how you travel. The trunks are prepared. The household here is left in Mrs. Hatch's management. Mrs. Hatch, who has been, over the past 3 months, steadily less careful in the half-second pause before answering your questions, who has become, if not exactly easy, then at least easier, who sometimes now says something additional beyond what was asked. You leave on a Tuesday, the carriage out of London in the early morning, through Mayfair and then southwest, the streets thinning as you leave the city's centre, the buildings becoming lower, the smell changing, the air changing, the quality of light as London releases you and the open country begins. You watch it happen from the carriage window, the city to the country, the long, slow shift. And at some point past Hounslow, past the point where London's grip loosens and the sky becomes actually sky, and not the London version of sky, the sky of 100 smoke fires filtered through haze. At that point, you lean your head back against the carriage cushion and close your eyes. The carriage moves. The horses on the road, the regular rhythm of hooves, the particular sound of wheels on different surfaces, the smell of October countryside coming through the window, fallen leaves, cold air with wood smoke under it, the weight between your shoulder blades, the weight that has been there since you first understood, some years back, that things were not as they should be, is still there. It doesn't disappear in one autumn morning. It doesn't disappear when you decide to look at the accounts, or when you sit down with Mr. Fellows, or when your husband arrives back from Wiltshire and you have the first real conversation in 9 years. But it's different. It has different dimensions now. It's the weight of something that is known, rather than something that is suspected but unexamined. Known things are, in your experience, more manageable than their shadows. You open your eyes, outside the October fields, brown and gold, the trees beginning to let go of their leaves, the ones that have already fallen lying in drifts along the road, the sky clear and pale and very high. This is the countryside you grew up near, not the Wiltshire but the same character of it, the same quality of English autumn, which is nothing so dramatic as the storms and the ruin of autumn in literature, which is more quiet than that, more measured, the way England itself is quiet in its way, the way things change here without quite announcing themselves. Wiltshire. The house emerges from the October afternoon light the way it always does, at the turn of the long drive. First the chimneys, then the roof line, then the full face of it, Georgian stone, warm even in October, the windows catching the low afternoon light and throwing it back. 47 servants here too, different set. The country household, people who have known this place for decades. They're at the door when the carriage arrives. The butler, older than Jenkins, slower but no less precise. Mrs. Williams, the housekeeper, who's been in this house since the previous Duke's time and who regards you, you've always thought, with a mixture of respect and mild scepticism, that you find genuinely interesting. Your husband arrives at the door a moment after you, coming from the library probably, where he spends his afternoons in Wiltshire. You get out of the carriage. October air, Wiltshire, the smell of the country, real country, damp earth and leaves and the particular quality of air that has had nothing to filter it for miles, clean in the way that London never quite manages. You look at the house, then you look at your husband. Welcome, he says. Thank you, you say. The butler opens the door. You go in. There is a particular quality to autumn evenings in a large country house that has, over years, come to mean something specific to you. The fire's lit early because October evenings require it. The smell of wood smoke different from London's coal, lighter, something almost resinous. The light of the fires competing with the last of the autumn daylight through the long windows. The sound of the house at its country rhythm, different from the city rhythm, slower, more regular. You sit by the fire in the drawing room. Tea has been brought. Your husband is in the armchair opposite. There have been 3 more conversations since August. They have been not easy, but honest. Increasingly honest. The word that keeps appearing in your mind when you think about them is provisional. They are provisional conversations, feeling out the shape of what might be possible, not making commitments that can't be kept, but not pretending that the shape of the thing is fixed. The marriage is... This is where you've arrived. The marriage is not over. Or not necessarily. It is also not what it was, which was never quite what it appeared to be. What it might become is the question you're both circling. Not with drama. With the particular English deliberateness of 2 people who are both raised to deal with complicated things by taking them apart methodically and seeing what can be salvaged. The fire crackles, the tea is hot. "James," you say. He looks at you. "I'd like to tell you something." He waits. "I'm going to need to be more involved in the estate management going forward," you say. "Not replacing graves. Not overriding your decisions, but present. Understanding what's happening, able to ask questions and receive real answers." He is quiet. "This is not negotiable," you say, gently. Another pause. "I know," he says finally. "Good," you say. "Catherine." "Yes." He's quiet again. The fire. The October evening around you both. "I'm sorry," he says. "It's the first time." You nod. You receive it. You sit with it for a moment. "I know," you say. And then you drink your tea and he drinks his, and the house settles into evening around you, and outside the Wiltshire dark presses against the windows, and inside the fire is warm. Tomorrow you will meet with the Wiltshire steward, whose name is Harrow, and whom you've met twice before at formal occasions, and who has the specific anxiety of a man who has been managing an estate, whose owner has been somewhat absent in attention, if not in body. You will be interested in the particulars. You will ask the questions that need asking. You will understand when you leave that meeting more about the estate than you understood going into it. This is what you're going to do. Not because it has to be dramatic. Not because you're staging some kind of rebellion against the frame of your life. Because you've been given a large and complex thing to manage and you have the ability to manage it, and there's no good reason not to. The nights in Wiltshire are longer than London nights. Or they feel that way. The country dark is denser. The absence of street noise and lamplight meaning that the house at midnight is genuinely still in a way that London never quite is. You lie in the Wiltshire bed and listen to the country dark. An owl somewhere. The sound of the wind in the trees that line the drive. No city underneath it. Just the dark and the cold and the house around you and your husband in the other room. The sleeping arrangements provisional still, everything provisional, and the estate outside the windows. Your estate, technically. This is one of the things Mr. Hartington, your solicitor, has been clarifying. The settlements give you more than you understood. There is a structure laid down by your father and his before him that places certain things in your sphere even within the framework of a marriage. You are going to learn that structure completely. You've already started. The owl calls again. Further away now, moving through the dark. Your eyes are heavy. The day was long. Tonight, just this. The dark, the quiet, the weight of the house around you, the estate beyond, the October country spreading out in every direction, and you, 31 years old, learning what you are. And here is the thing about being a Georgian Duchess that nobody tells you. The other thing, the thing that comes after the relentlessness, the thing on the other side of the exhaustion of performance. When you put down the performance, not in front of an audience. You don't put it down in front of audiences. That's not how it works. But in the private hours, the 5 o'clock awakenings, the library at midnight, the carriage between London and Wiltshire, when you put down the performance, there's something still there. You, still there. The girl from Derbyshire who could walk for miles in the hills, the woman who reads margins in old books and finds arguments with dead writers to be among the more satisfying conversations available to her. The person who knows the name of the scullery maid and that the scullery maid's mother is unwell in Cheapside, and who asked last week whether Mrs. Hatch had heard if she was improving. The person who looked at the accounts and understood what she saw. The person who is going to spend the next decade understanding this estate, this household, this marriage, and whatever else comes after, because that is what you do with things you've been given. You understand them as fully as possible, and then you act accordingly. Practical is where you live. Practical is what you're good at. And underneath practical tonight, in the Wiltshire dark, something else. The faint, unperformed thing that is simply you, here, alive, in October, with 40 years ahead and things you haven't yet imagined beginning to take their first, formless shape. Enough. That's enough. The country outside does what it has done for centuries, turns and breathes and keeps its long, indifferent rhythm. The same rhythm it will keep long after the house and the name and the blue curtains in London are all gone. Long after the accounts have been settled and the roses replaced and the library read to its final page. But that's not yet. The fire in the grate burns down to its last. The October dark presses soft against the windows of the Ashworth estate in Wiltshire, and somewhere outside in that dark the country you've inherited and the country you're inheriting continue their long indifferent turning, leaves coming down in the lanes, the last harvest in, the fields going quiet. Tomorrow there will be meetings and accounts and conversations half finished and half begun. There will be the specific weather of a marriage examined and being rebuilt, or rebuilt in part, or possibly something else entirely. You still don't know, and you've decided that not knowing for now is tolerable. Information is better than assumption. You've proved that this summer. The clock in the hall strikes 11. Think of the roses in the morning room at Grosvenor Square. Deep red, deep pink. The summer versions going now. The autumn ones coming in. Mrs. Hatch will keep them right. Think of the library. The shelves you're 2/3 through. The rest waiting. Think of Eleanor in Brook Street looking at you across a tea tray and saying, "You look like yourself again." Think of the bee on the lavender in the square's garden on a Sunday afternoon. The concentrated work of it. The perfect economy. Think of Bramble in the Wiltshire stables, old now but still quick, knowing you before you speak. The warmth of the fire still just barely. The sound of the house settling. The October wind in the trees. Your hands on the blanket relaxed. Your back flat against the mattress. The stays off hours ago. Your body at its actual dimensions. Your face in the dark, not performing anything for anyone. Let the day go. Let the accounts and the letters and the 9 payments and the solicitor's careful voice go. Let the dinner tables and the curtsies and the calculated conversations go. Let the performance go for tonight. You've earned the dark and the quiet and the not performing, the same as you've earned it every night of this strange and difficult and in the end somewhat clarifying summer. The summer you stopped pretending not to see what was in front of you and started looking. Looking costs something. It costs the comfort of not knowing. But you're better equipped now than you were in the spring, when your husband left for Wiltshire and the account sat in Mrs. Hatch's folder, and the letter from Mr. Fellows arrived, and everything that had been theoretical became quietly practical. Practical is where you live. Practical is what you're good at. And underneath practical tonight, the faint, unperformed thing that is simply you, here, alive, in October. You're warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have a great deal of work ahead of you. You find you don't mind. Tomorrow there will be Harrow and the estate accounts. There will be the particular weather of a marriage that is neither over nor what it was. Both parties feeling carefully towards something new. There will be letters to write and conversations to have and the endless, intelligent, necessary business of running things well. But that's tomorrow, and tomorrow will begin, and you'll manage it. And the day after that, and the day after that, each one taken in full because that is what you do now. Centuries will pass. The house you know will change beyond recognition. The plasterwork cherubs will crumble and be replaced. The blue curtains, those curtains, finally, will be gone, replaced by something someone in a future century chose that you will never see. The streets of Grosvenor Square will be paved and lit and filled with machines you couldn't imagine. The Thames will be tamed, the candles will be replaced and replaced again, but women will still lie awake at 5 in the morning in large houses, thinking about accounts and letters and what they are and what they're becoming. Still learning in the quiet hours before the household wakes what they're actually capable of. Still discovering that the frame is larger than they've been using. Some things don't change. The weight of performance doesn't change, and neither does the relief of setting it down. The specific exhaustion of managing everything while appearing to manage nothing. That doesn't change. And the thing beneath it, the thing that is still there when the performance is gone, the stubbornness of the self that remains after everything else has been arranged and calculated and correctly deployed, that persists through every era, every house, every version of the same negotiation between what a woman is permitted and what she actually is. You are here, in the dark, at the end of a day that asked a great deal of you and got it. The warmth of the bed around you, the sounds of the country coming faint through the window glass, the owl, the wind, the distant creak of the old house settling into itself as it has settled for 100 years. Let the thoughts slow now. Let them soften and finally stop. Let the morning room with its roses go. Let Mr. Fellows's crabbed handwriting go. Let Mrs. Alderton's sharp eyes and the dinner table and the card parties and the whole elaborate performance go. Let it all go for tonight. There is only this, the dark and the quiet and the October country and the long, slow drift toward morning. You have earned this rest. Take it. Good night.